Good morning. My name is Dominic Calabro. I'm honored to serve as president and CEO of Florida Tax Watch. I'm really honored, among other reasons. Lloyd, you and a few others have been around a long time, know this is the 40th anniversary of Florida Tax Watch. So we're going to be passing around some notations about our 40th anniversary. We'll have throughout the year recognition by the governor, cabinet, legislature, civic, business leaders around the state, newspapers, news organizations, editorial boards all around, celebrating the fact that, in 1979, this group of civic and business leaders said we need a group that would be there to help Florida, which was kind of an adolescent state, grow into maturity. And part of that maturity is to promote good fiscal stewardship, government accountability, and a greater engagement and awareness of citizens in their civic duty, and learning how to become better citizens, more actively engaged, especially of how the taxpayers, their tax dollars are collected and spent. So among four unique things that Florida Tax Watch does, one was recognized yesterday before the governor and cabinet. We had a resolution. I know it was like top on your list of all the things to do yesterday, but we recognized by the governor and cabinet for the 30th anniversary of which is now the Tax Watch Government Productivity Awards. Previously was the Davis Productivity Awards for many, many years, founded by J. and A.D. Davis, and then Prudential Productivity Awards. So we're going to kick off and announce the winners in mid-July. We hope to have the governor and cabinet there as well, and the actual ceremony will be done in September. So with all that being said, it's one of the four things that Tax Watch does that's not done anywhere in the country. Right. The other one, which is obviously one that gets a lot of notoriety, is the annual Turkey Watch, Budget Turkey Report. And so I am honored to release our 2019 annual Budget Turkey Report from Florida Tax Watch. This is an analysis of the transparency and the accountability of the state budget process. This is a report that we have been doing for 35 years to promote proper oversight and to promote integrity in the state's budgeting process based on the principle that because money is appropriated by the legislature, it truly belongs first and foremost to the taxpayers that worked very hard to earn it. The process must be transparent and accountable, and every appropriation should receive sufficient vetting, deliberation, and public debate. Without that, we can't tell whether it's really going to produce value or not, and we can't really hold the entity that receives the money, whether it's a private entity or a public entity or for-profit or nonprofit, accountable for its result. If it's just appropriated without that kind of accountability, it's just a hope and a prayer that some good will come of it. So it's a very, very important process, and fortunately, through the years, governors have used this very, very wisely. Under Democratic, beginning with Governor Bob Graham, through Governor Martinez, Governor Childs, Governor Bush, Governor Chris, and Governor Scott, and now I think under Governor DeSantis, has actually used it to line item over $3 billion that we've helped identify. They've done more, some less, but it's been a lot of money. This report identifies appropriations that circumvent that very transparency and accountability standards in public budgeting. Budget turkeys are items usually local member projects, but not always. Sometimes they have a regional, statewide, but they're placed in individual line items or accompanying proviso language in the state budget that are added to the final general appropriations bill without being properly scrutinized and without the proper budget committee process, or bypasses a legislatively established process. A perfect example of that is we years ago have identified a lot of historic preservation projects that used to get funded nilly-willy, and the legislature said, okay, Tax Watch, please back off. They established in law a process in the Secretary of State's office. It was really, really thoughtful one, where the Division of Historical Restoration, they had a volunteer group that looked at them. They had architects, engineers. They'd get requests from around the state, from all the counties, rural, large, mid-size, and so forth. And they'd go through a vetting and review process that would say, they kind of spread it around, but also make sure that if the requests collectively say there were 50 applicants and the requests were maybe $60 million, if the legislature appropriated $10 million, then whatever the first prioritized groups of projects that met around $10 million would get funded. Anything above that would be subject to this kind of budget review and scrutiny. So they did that, and I think that's the kind of thing we're looking at as a proper, where the legislature should be able to insert things, but go through the very process that they have established, either in law or in process to do that. The budget turkey label does not, again, I know you guys report on it, but it's really important, does not signify judgment of a project's worthiness. In fact, there's a number of projects in here that are very worthy. Probably on their own, they would be something that we would independently say, yeah, fund it. But it's the process by which it was inserted in the budget. The review focuses on the budget process. That is the outcome. Without a vetting process, we can't really have confidence that it would meet the test of that accountability, value add, and return on investment. It needs to have that deliberation, debate, and accountability that the public and the taxpayers rightly deserve. Taxpayers don't have a choice whether they pay taxes or not. If they don't, they go to jail. So they have a reasonable expectation that, spending their hard-earned money is going to be justified and appropriate. And I think one of our founders said there's nothing more delicious in life than spending OPM, other people's money. So we want to make sure it's done with respect and done with some sense of reverence. Especially, I think, basically fiscal conservatives that like liberty, that want liberty, want to maintain a limited government, would like this kind of review process to kind of keep a review and limit on them. While a project may be worthwhile, these projects tend to serve a more limited, not statewide, usually more parochial area. They're often not core functions of government. They're more appropriately funded with local or private dollars, and they often circumvent the competitive bidding or selection and oversight and accountability processes that the legislature has often established. Now, the $91.1 billion budget passed by the legislature for 2019-20 contains 109 items, appropriation items worth $133 million, qualifying under our fairly strict criteria. While this is a relatively small portion, it's actually only, less than 1/10 of 1%. Now, again, we didn't make judgments on the other 99.99%, but it's still a significant amount of money that could have been spent in areas such as early education. That $133 million could have been spent additionally in classrooms, whether it's charter or public classrooms, hurricane recovery, service for children, the elderly, those special needs, and even some cases, tax cuts, particularly communication services tax, which affect the most everybody, and especially the poor more harshly than others. Something we want to mention is that Tax Watch allowed for more legislative flexibility this year because of adjusting for some hurricane-related activity. Oftentimes, in the first year of a new gubernatorial administration, the governors more recently have asserted their veto pen very aggressively. But given our independent assessment and what we believe that you all have witnessed, a fairly substantial collegiality and civility, which we do not see in Washington, by the way. We're a model for Washington, if not other states. That collegiality with which the Senate and House leaders worked together and also worked very closely with the governor. Florida Tax Watch recommends a relatively light touch. It has been the past tradition. Florida Tax Watch, we discussed these with a draft report and findings with the governor's office for his own statewide review and judgment. We did look at what has been in the past, so this is actually very, very small, and it speaks well of the leadership of Senate President Bill Galvano. We give him some good praise, and we give recognition also to Speaker Oliva. Again, it's a very, very small percentage. If we can tighten up a little bit, we may even have zero. We've had zero budget turkeys over the past 30, 35 years, about 3 or 4 different times. We looked at the record we had in years past, and in 2001, there were 283 million, 2002, 297, 204, 202 million. In 2005, there were 240, 2006, 295 million, 2007, 256, and yet the governor vetoed substantially more. And in 2011, 203 million, when the governor vetoed a very, very big number. So governors often come in, but I think given the collegiality and also more than that, I think they've done a good job. We were really concerned about the sprinkle. that last minute sprinkling. And we began to see that actually a lot of those items, because we did a very thorough vetting look at it, a lot of those items had already been vetted. They just were pulled out and then put back in again. So we try to take that into full consideration, but we tried as much as humanly possible to be absolutely consistent in our review. So without further ado, I want to ask Kurt Winter, who's the author of this and a 38-year veteran of Florida Tax Watch, who's a leader in this regard. Kurt?
Good morning, everyone. The appropriation project rules that the legislature adopted a few years ago have reduced the number of budget turkeys, particularly items that are added to the budget for the first time during conference. Those used to comprise the majority of our Turkey Watch report, and they have been limited since the rules came into place. This session, though, there were several instances of new items being added in conference, including member districts, even though the joint rules actually prohibit that. Florida Tax Watch hopes this is just an aberration and not a sign of a return to these old ways of budgeting. But as Dominic mentioned, the most disconcerting thing about this year's appropriation process from a budget turkey perspective was the supplemental funding lists, or what they call the sprinkle lists. They've been being used for several years now, but this year was a record. It's usually the very last thing that they do in conference. Virtually after everything is closed out, they say, we have a supplemental list, and the House has a supplemental list, and we accept them both. This year, so it's virtually the last thing that they do. This year, where they were record in size, the Senate list had 127 items worth $153.5 million. The House funded 110 items at $136.2. This means that $289.7 million in hard-earned taxpayer dollars were spent as almost an afterthought after all the various budget areas have been closed out. And so while the rules have relatively limited the number of turkeys, it has not limited member projects. House members filed 1,631 bills this year, 300 more than last year, requesting appropriation projects totaling $3.7 billion. The Senate requested 1,673 projects totaling $3.5. That's 42 projects and $88 million per senator. This year's budget contained approximately 600 member projects worth $450 million. This brings the 3-year total of member projects funded in the budget since the appropriation rules took effect to 1,800 member projects worth $1.7 billion. Because of this, we are again offering recommendations to help stem the tide of member projects, which have their place and can be very good projects. Our thing is, if you're going to spend these in these areas where the state doesn't traditionally spend money, there needs to be thorough vetting of them all. We would like to mention that the legislature did pass an improvement that we've been recommending in the Turkey Watch report for a few years now, having to do with university and college construction projects. They're strengthening that process, putting in a scoring system, and most importantly, it will focus on completing projects that they've begun instead of adding new ones, which the legislature has tended to do in recent years, putting new projects on the board before the other ones are finished. So we were happy to see that, and we hope they will continue to make some improvements, such as keeping the current appropriation project rules and improving on them. We also recommend that they establish more competitive selection processes in areas like economic development projects, housing and community development projects, workforce, local water projects, school and instructional enhancements, private colleges and universities, mentoring and student assistant initiatives, and 2 ones that have come up recently are special local law enforcement projects and fixed capital outlay for local fire services. These are all line items in the budget that have become areas for a number of member projects, and they've been growing. We also think that they should avoid the supplemental list, the sprinkle list. Adding money to something that's been debated and as a core function of government, and they just decide that they have more money to put towards it, is one thing. Funding a member project is another. Funding something that has never been discussed in the budget process at the last minute is totally another one. And the other is the local transportation projects, which we have highlighted for years. these are projects that are put in the budget that are going to be funded out of the State Transportation Trust Fund, and they are not in the work program. That means that projects that are in the work program, which is a very good process for making a coordinated transportation system in the state, will be supplanted. They make up the...
What that means, if I may, those projects that have been vetted, planned, and so forth, and for which all plans have been done and it's been equitably distributed, will be supplanted by those that hadn't had that kind of review. It's kind of like jumping ahead of the line without the proper vetting. And we kind of think that is unfair in America. So that's why it's always on our list.
And a lot of them are local projects, which really you're not even supposed to use the State Transportation Trust Fund for local roads. And they're becoming, some of them are coming even more far removed from actually being even a transportation project. So that's one area we think they need to have a better system for. Those local transportation projects are the largest part of Florida Tax Watch Turkey List report. You will also find some higher education construction projects, agricultural promotion and education facilities, local parks, beach projects, museums, historic preservation, all of which circumvented established processes for these type of projects. We are also pointing out some areas that do not qualify under our strict criteria for turkeys, but we would like the governor, we're recommending that they take a closer case-by-case look at them. Those are the 51 local water projects, 33 projects in the Department of Economic Opportunity. There are three line items there, which I had mentioned earlier: economic development, housing and community development, and workforce projects that have become a member project funding mechanisms. And 59 school and instructional enhancement projects. And last, being another issue that's been growing, is tens of millions of dollars going to private organizations and local governments to construct, renovate, repair, and even purchase buildings that the state does not or will not own. So that is what makes up the Turkey Watch report this year, and if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
What's the biggest turkey, Kurt?
In terms of dollars, it would be one of the transportation projects. I believe it was $13 million. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Yeah, $13.3 million, I believe, is the biggest one on the list. In Citrus County.
89A?
Yeah, 1989A in Citrus County. And again, the project may be a reasonable one. It's a county road. It's not in the work program. Some of these projects may be either in the work program or part of another project that is in the work program, but they're in future years. They're not in the current year. That's why they had to have a member project request. All of these projects here were requested by members in the transportation area.
How much does the administration rely on your Turkey Watch list when the governor's preparing his own line item videos?
It's varied, but we've had at least a few years when we said zero, the governor followed and it was zero. There's at least 3 years, if not 4, that occurred. Governor Bush had 1 or 2 years of 90%. Governor Chris' first year, 90%, 89.9, it was about 90. Governor Scott, 90 the first year. So, but on average, it tends to average around 67, about 2/3. You know, and part of it is, it's not like we sit there and we, please do this. There's no bartering or anything like that. Just the criteria that we've developed, the governor's office has used to look at things from a statewide perspective. So when you read the budget line item veto message, whether it's Governor Scott, whether it's Governor Christ or Governors Bush and so forth, they almost read right out of our report. I mean, they read that circumvented an established budget process, was outside the state transportation funding source, was, a local project that it was not, so you'll see in our list there'll also be a reason and a rationale why that's often done. Now, the governor, we fully expect, one day it'll be she, but he has other considerations. Ours is just a professional, independent assessment, and we think that sometimes people go like, that was technically maybe, but we think we deserve it, or we ought to get it, it's really important. We say to the groups, good, make your case for the governor. That's perfectly fine. That we think is a healthy give and take. We don't expect about 1,000, but at the same point, we do know, and we've heard from past governors, past appropriations chairs in the House and Senate, that without this, there'd be less discipline, a little less oversight and fiscal pressure to keep it in line. Here's the point. We elect people statewide, okay? And we also elect local House and Senate members. And it's that give and take to see that we spend the state taxpayers' money largely on statewide or regional issues that connect to the state core functions. We know that there's going to be some local, but to the extent that we can minimize those, it would be better. Or if we're going to do some of those, then establish a process or plot like the historic restoration program. So we know, okay, there'll be so much, and there's at least a thoughtful, relatively equitable means of distributing, and we can hold them accountable. The problem is if you have something just out of nowhere and it says give $500,000 to nonprofit X or for-profit Y, they get it whether they achieve a public benefit or not. They may or may not. It's like Katie barred the doors. You never know. It's willy-nilly. So, we want to make sure that we can tie as much of it to good stewardship as possible because that's just a conservative fiscal way of governing. So, and we've, as Governor Bush once said long ago, Florida Tax Watch was conservative before conservative was cool. And we've just maintained that for now our 40th year. This is we started in 83 and then didn't do it 84, 85, 86. We did in 86 and thereafter. So we're pleased to present it. It's an important contribution, but it's actually very small of all the things we do, but it does get a lot of attention because it's, we're the only one they don't do it at the national level because they can't. As much as they bemoan it, they can't have any effect because we have line on a veto, but we don't know of any other organization in any state that does this, and we think it's a very valuable practice that other governors, Democrat, Republican alike, have used, and we think and they tell us that it's really critically important. So.
Dominic, let me ask you to clarify. In the press release, it says the budget passed for 1920 contained 109 appropriations qualifying as budget turkeys worth $133 million. The very next paragraph, when you talk about the sprinkle lists, you say this means nearly $290 million in hard-earned taxpayer dollars appropriated without proper review. But what's the
Yeah, that's a really good. We were first really concerned. We first started looking and go like, "What the heck is going on here?" But a lot of the sprinkle list, we realized that some of the sprinkle list has already been vetted. Okay, here's what happened: you pull it out, you go to conference, it's not there. Okay, which means we're not going to spend it. The whole idea of going to conference is, okay, House, give us your best position. Senate, give us your best position. You bring it to conference, and it's over. And so when you do the sprinkle, it's like, okay, we thought it was over, but it's not over. Well, it's never over until the fat lady sings, as they say, or until it's truly over. And that, I think, is wise. We would like to see less. And there's almost it's almost like the term sprinkle is, it wasn't our term. It doesn't show the kind of, I think, respect that we want to people that work really hard to pay their taxes and have their money sprinkled is just a concern. So we would like to make sure that when they go to conference, conference means conference, and that they've been things previously debated. We're also concerned when items start out at $50,000 somewhere and they come up to be either $500,000 or sometimes $5 million. It's like that's a radically different project. So this is not for any one particular program or this. It's to promote as great a statewide stewardship as possible while truly understanding and respecting the legislature's desire in the House and Senate, Republican or Democrat, to respond to their constituents' needs. We've got to have a filter that says these are reasonable requests, these are not. And we do the same thing like with county governments and you can't fund everything. You got to say county functions should be funded by the county, city by the city, local projects by philanthropy. So same thing applies here. So we're not.
Yeah. If I missed it in the report, let me know. But how does the $133 million finding for this year compare to the last, let's say, 10 years?
Yeah, I just said in fact, I got a copy of it if you want. I just mentioned some of them.
It's been similar in terms of dollars and number of projects in the last 3 years since the appropriation rules came in. But before that,
was much
it was
higher.
higher.
Yeah. For example, 2000, I'll give you some of the years if you want. In 2011, we identified 203 million, but the governor vetoed far more. Some of it was double appropriation. In 2007, it was 256, again on a much, much smaller budget. 2006, it was 295 million, almost 300. 2005 was 240 million. 2004, 202 million. 202. In 2003, it was zero. 2002 was 297 million. In 2001, it was 283 million.
So the fact that this number is as relatively low as it is in a budget that is a record high, I guess is a good thing.
Yeah, we said it. My comments are, we think they did a very good job. We want to commend them that they did a good job. They used some restraint. I mean, they could have used more, and they could have limited the last-minute additions. And we've seen them through the years. It's not the first time, but now it's been more commonly used. A few years ago, the whole transparency, when I went to conference and they had stuff, and literally the appropriations chair from the House had his list and the Senate appropriate, and they literally swapped to say, okay, I'll take this. And that was the whole, and you guys may have been there, right, Lloyd? And you guys see that happen, and they just switched 6 pages worth of 193 items worth, a couple $100 million without any real vetting, just between the two people, maybe their speaker and president. So it's getting better, but it can be better. And I think the big issue is, look, we have a new governor in town, and I think he wants to say, here's the priorities that I got elect. The people voted for us, and that's environmental stewardship, education funding, public safety, and let's make sure we spend them, because these are monies. First of all, they start out to be a whole lot bigger. So we continue through this effort to put pressure to keep that at bay. Okay, so that's important. If you don't do this, it's going to be considerably higher, and it's important to keep it limited because, restoration of our waters and lakes are essential for not only our safety and health and well-being, but also for the economy and for the growth of Florida as we know it. So they're important. They've done a better and better job. We commend them on it, and again, commend the Speaker and President, because really they are the key folks behind it, and with the governor's leadership to say, look, let's keep these to limited. So when in years past when it was zero, the governor worked with taxpayers to play a very critical role in doing that. So once or twice under Childs, and a couple times under Bush and someone else. So that's important. But anyway, overall, we think it's pretty good. We recommend that the governor not do what his predecessors have done, take a very aggressive veto, light touch, not just because of the collegiality, but because they really did a good job in principle.
And we do hope that he takes a look at some issues
Processes.
that aren't on this list.
Yeah, we want better. I mean, look, we're never satisfied. I mean, that's the purpose of what we do. As good as you get, you can be better. And you don't just go, oh yeah, they're good. We don't need to do anything. No, it's constantly do better.
Yeah, go ahead. I think one of the points that we were trying to make is that there are fewer turkeys, but that doesn't mean there are fewer member projects. But the member projects are more transparent and accountable now with the new rules. But you guys have probably seen the subcommittee meetings where they've approved the House bills for appropriation projects. It's a pretty pro forma exercise. I think we counted one year out of thousands of votes, there was 3 no votes. They were all cast by the same legislator on those bills. So they're out there, but at least you can go find out what they are by going and looking at the request forms.
Lloyd?
It's not on the turkey list. I know you guys have taken this position. Is there anything the governor can do about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
Yes.
Being rated,
Well, we actually came out with a report this session recommending that they don't sweep it. They did put $200 million into it this year, which is the most they've done in a while. But as you probably know, over the last 10 years, they've actually swept more money from those funds than they've spent. And we have affordable housing, workforce housing crisis in Florida. We think that should stop. There is an item on our turkey list, a housing project that was funded out of the Sadowski funds, because we think that the Housing Finance Corporation historically has decided where that money goes based on surveys of where the needs are.
And the legislature created that process to do that. So we don't want them to double rate it. you know.
Yeah, so this was, I think, the first member project we've seen in affordable housing, and we think it would set a bad precedent. It could very well be a good project, but that's not the way to do it.
Lloyd, we actually thought about taking this to the commission, Constitutional Revision Commission, going forward. I mean, I think there'd be a lot of support to put trust in trust funds, but not all trust funds are really the same kind. But the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund is, and over $1.7 billion has been swiped, if you will. And we believe, look, if there's collecting too much money, then lower the rate, and so you don't over collect. But if you're going to have it, put trust back into trust funds. So probably a strong call from Governor DeSantis about that to make sure that it does what it's intended to do, and we have the discipline, and the House and Senate follows that accordingly. I know with the Transportation Trust Fund, there was strong interest that when the state did swipe it, they put much of that money back. So we hope that, first, they don't continue to dig a deeper hole. Secondly, they can begin to maybe pay some of it, because we do have a crisis. It's a real serious crisis. So maybe by law, put trust back into at least a few of these trust funds that really are legitimate trust funds. Any further questions? Yes, sir.
The governor's budget proposal did include fully funding the Sadowski Trust.
Right.
So that's got to be a good sign, right?
No, it's a good sign. It's a good sign. I mean,
The
look,
Senate also proposed for fully funded.
yeah. So, I mean, I think, when you get 2 out of 3 key participants, then it's a good shot. And I think Tax Watch calling for that again is a good reminder. I've got one other thing I want to mention. It's unrelated to this. Can I, unless you guys got questions, ladies?
Well,
Yeah.
before we
Yeah.
lose you, on a semi-related note, do you want to give an early report card on the new old Department of Revenue Commissioner, good, bad, or too soon to tell?
Well, I'm prejudiced. Jim Zingali hired me 40 years ago. But nonetheless, yeah, I have a lot of respect for him. He's extremely talented. I'm glad he was willing to come back. He's extraordinarily accomplished. We've had our battles through the years, all healthy and respectful, but I think the state's going to be well served by having Dr. Jim Zingali as our revenue director on that one. Let me mention one other. It's a big fiscal issue. We came out, Florida Taxes came out with a report a year ago. I want us to update it. And now I see the Urban Institute follows suit with Tax Watch. The 2020 census is going to be tremendously important to every state, but especially large, fast-growing states like Florida. Okay? Florida Taxes published a report. Leah, you can maybe help get a copy to the folks. If you can't, maybe Tiana can get a couple copies made for those who have any interest in it. Because we undercount, just a small percentage, we can undercount by 500,000 people very easily. I mean, we have 21 plus million people here, okay, and growing. We're growing nearly 1,000 a day, net. That's a lot of folks. That's more than a city and 1 or 2 cities a year. So by not counting, there are literally billions of dollars that we lose over the next 10 years. So we need to make sure that we work with the counties and the cities. We did a report that showed very small successful efforts, and I think we lost a lot of money. So we need to do everything we can, even in the interim. Maybe it's an emergency thing, maybe by the Joint Legislative Budget Commission, that may empower our counties and cities to have the resource to make sure that they have every address that they possibly have properly vetted and properly counted, because we stand to lose. Even when you do that, we're still going to lose a lot of counts. But we got to do everything we possibly can, because we're about to lose hundreds of millions of dollars each year, and that minimally, if not billions of dollars. And a growing state like Florida already gets shortchanged by billions. We don't need to add to it by not doing a highly proficient job when we possibly can.